Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Tyler Vaughan, Channel Sales Manager at PreRoll-Er. Thank you very much for joining me today, Tyler.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm looking forward to a good chat, man.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Tyler, I always like to start with a little bit of background, get to know the person a little bit. So how did you get your start in the cannabis industry?
That's got to be the most curious answer that anybody has to provide to you on a podcast like this. Yeah, it was pretty wild. So I've always been on the automation side. I've been in the industry for about 5 years now, which in dog years, as we all say, is like, I don't know, 30. I should be retiring, I think, right? But so I've always kind of had that specialty on packaging automation, pre-roll automation, and been really, kind of humbled by this industry in the sense that I think that we possess some of the greatest people, really relative to any industry. And I think the rest of the world kind of needs to know that, which is why I enjoy coming on podcasts like this to kind of share that knowledge, share my background and expertise. And I enjoy helping people solve problems, right? Like that's sales. It should be in a nutshell. And I think I take that pretty seriously and really enjoy just, talking with guys like you and talking with customers and seeing the journey that everybody's on.
Did you really start your professional career as a middle school teacher?
I did. Yes, I did. What seems like, again, a lifetime ago. So a Spanish teacher, nonetheless. I'm a bit rusty now, but as you're going through college, right, and you have no clue what you want to do, which is, I still feel like sometimes I don't know what I want to do, but yes, I did start out. I loved it. It was great. I was a middle school teacher, so trial by fire. I don't have kids. Maybe that's the reason too. So
I was curious to see that just because I initially started out in teaching, pursuing a teaching degree as well. And so I was kind of curious, what made you transition out of education?
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to work with another company, and I'd kind of just gone back to school and got my MBA and was pretty jazzed up on all things business, sales, and marketing in particular. And that was always sort of my background after I transitioned out of teaching. Started a pretty successful company outside of the cannabis industry, cut my chops a little bit in that, living through the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, understanding what small businesses have to overcome. And I think that dovetailing into cannabis, ironically, from that experience really puts me in a position to really understand our customers that we work with on a daily basis, whether they're small, medium, or even the massive MSOs that exist in this world, right? So, I don't know how I got here, to be fair, but for whatever reason, I'm good at what I do, and I love the cannabis industry from the standpoint of, I think there's so much potential that just everyone needs to know and see and destigmatize kind of all of us that work in this industry. So
what was the company that you started?
Yeah, so I started Renegade GK. It was a company that was in the soccer industry. It still exists today. My business partner still runs it. I had moved out west, and it just wasn't totally feasible to continue to run a company remotely that needed someone on site. So had a blast doing that. Really got to experience supply chain logistics. I ran a lot of the front end, so the sales, customer facing side. So, obviously naturally transitioning into the cannabis space. I get to continue to work with the customers alongside our engineers at PreRoll-Er in particular, who do a lot of the technical support. So I'm a huge fan of customer service. I think that I grew a business based on essentially giving really good products at a fair price with exceptional customer service. And I see a lot of the customers in our space that are doing the same thing, and they're succeeding against what some might say are impossible odds, right? So I kind of love that background and connecting with people.
Do you think being an entrepreneur, having your own business, better prepared you, kind of steeled you to what you were going to face in the cannabis industry?
Oh, 100%. This is an industry that faces the most ridiculous challenges, whether it's regulatory challenges or just lack of access to capital. And, as an entrepreneur in any industry, you have to have problem solving skills. You got to think outside of the box, or else you're probably not going to survive long term, or you're not going to thrive. You may survive, but it might be pretty painful. And I see that all the time. And I think that my experience, as an entrepreneur and starting a business and trying to figure out, how in the world do we manage books and cash flow and, financial and sales projections, right? Like those are not fun things for creatives that like to, create collateral and marketing advertisements to sit around a table and do, but you're forced to as an entrepreneur. You have to wear many hats. And I think we see that in this industry across the board is we have an industry full of really exceptional individuals that are doing 10 jobs just because of the simple fact that they're growing so fast, and growth in this industry is exponential for a lot of people. And before they know it, they're solving problems tomorrow that they never envisioned they'd ever have to face for the next year yesterday. So I think that it gives me an ability to relate a little bit more. And yeah, I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the experience to kind of have been lucky enough and fortunate enough to have started a company that's still around and still successful. And yeah, it was a good, fun journey. So,
Well, you've talked about the potential this industry has. You've talking about the engineering prowess that this industry has. In your opinion, is that still fairly unknown to the wider public?
yeah, I mean, I think that what we're seeing now that we weren't seeing maybe 5 years ago is we're seeing new customers, established brands and businesses going to automation first. So particularly with new customers, right? And I think that's kind of what you probably talk about on here a lot of the time is that I think we are at a time in this industry where we have educated businesses and enough to where they understand that the investment upfront in automation, it will actually help them. Again, I like to say survive, but that seems pretty horrible, right? But it's more about thriving, right? It's just succeeding longer term, because initial investments in any type of automated equipment, doesn't matter if you're in pharmaceuticals or if you're in big tobacco, right? Like sometimes they can be pretty large and significant. I think that we have pivoted a bit though to not be afraid of that as an industry. And I mean, those of us on the equipment and manufacturing side too have had to get creative with providing access financially to equipment, creating kind of our own short-term financing internally or leasing programs internally. And a lot of them do it. We do it, of course, and a lot of our competitors do it. And I think that's great, because the worst thing we can do is have a wonderful solution sitting at PreRoll-Er headquarters that no one can access financially. And I think we've had to make those connections as manufacturers on the equipment side and for customers, and just helping provide a pathway to success, right?
What is the current state when it comes to access to capital? We've heard a lot of rumblings in terms of rescheduling and what that might mean, but is everything still sort of status quo?
Yeah, I think it is actually. I just think that from my perspective, right? I suspect there's a listener that would disagree with me, right? And but I think from my perspective, everything is kind of status quo. I do think obviously we're in an election year, and here that's right around the corner. And who knows what's going to happen, of course, no matter what perspective we apply to an election year. I get the sense that because those of us that are creatively providing pathways, especially with PreRoll-Er, for us, we create internal financial pathways for customers that traditionally probably wouldn't be able to qualify. And I mean, again, I think we've all had to think outside of the box as we've seen an industry that has had to evolve, but I mean, I think you're right. I do think it's status quo to an extent. Yeah, I have conversations every single day with people that are new to the industry. So I think for a lot of us that have done this a long time, we may have a sense that, there's not as many new businesses, entrepreneurs, brands starting. And I think there are. I just think that they're getting a little bit better about flying under the radar, absorbing market share, and kind of eroding some of the, their local competitors. And again, that's not new. That's not nuanced from a business perspective. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I think that access to capital will always be a handicap for a lot of brands. So those of us that in the whatever space you're in and whatever segment of the market you're in that are providing access to equipment, yeah, it's massive. It's what moves the needle forward.
What are some of those creative pathways that PreRoll-Er has created in order to improve access to capital?
Yeah. So, I like to tell people we have traditional pathways. We've got a purchase program, obviously. We've got a short-term finance. And then we have a lease to own platform as well. But I think that the biggest thing that I could say when anyone's looking at financing or whenever anyone's looking, to work with PreRoll-Er and to work with me is I tell customers all the time, look, we'll work with you. And I think that allows them to breathe a sigh of relief so that it's not, the end of the rope if they don't have bank statements for the last 10 years, and I think that we as a company have had to, apply common sense business management and financial, essentially risk management to some of these conversations. And I think we do that really well. So yeah, we have our standard pathways. Leasing has become popular, of course. It reduces the barrier to entry from an automation standpoint. It gets customers from, and not necessarily always inferior, but whether their throughput needs to be greater or they're looking to produce higher quality pre-rolls, maybe an infused blend. It gets them to that level without having to break the bank essentially and totally destroy their cash flow.
What are you seeing more of right now? Are you seeing more people buying equipment outright? Are you seeing more people financing equipment or more people leasing equipment?
Yeah, so we want people to buy equipment, of course, right? So, but no. In all seriousness, that's a great question, and I think that it's ironically a blend still. I doubt that would be the answer most people would probably have expected, but look, I mean, when it comes to purchasing automation equipment, we have a variety of different costs. We have a variety of, again, what do you need? Because we have a solution for it. I think that's a tough thing for me when I get into a conversation with someone to say, yeah, we can do it. Sure, whatever you want is a slippery slope because we have an industry that's incredibly creative and thinks about things that I've never, considered would be the next best pre-roll, right? So I think for me, it's probably just having that conversation about where do you want to go. But I mean, we have options that are as low as $3,800 a month, and they include consumables. So I mean, our hope is that we're providing pathways to purchase that fit the financial needs requirements of a customer. I mean, if you're short-term financing, that's a great pathway because you can spread your payments out. So, it looks a little bit more like a flat out purchase, but you can spread payments out. So I think we've done a good job in particular with our leasing program is we generally take a deposit up front, which is a standard thing like everybody does. And then we give you some time to breathe so that I think the goal is for you to kind of start production, start producing and generating revenue before you have to start paying those monthly payments. So again, we have flexible pathways that I would venture to say anyone who is doing business the right way, maybe is the right way to qualify that, can access automation. It is a misconception that brands and businesses and even entrepreneurs that are starting out cannot afford automation. We have an option for you no matter what.
Is that the most difficult part of the sales cycle for you? Getting in the door, having that first conversation, and maybe engaging somebody in that conversation just because they see a piece of automation equipment and immediately think, I can't afford it?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is an industry where we've done an incredible job with automation. In particular, with PreRoll-Er, we have been at this a long time, and we have some really phenomenal automation equipment that every time I see it and I work there, I'm like, how did we come up with this, right? And so I'm thinking, well, if I'm a brand walking an event, right? We were at Cleveland last week or a couple of weeks ago, and I'm thinking, yeah, I want that. Of course, I want that PR 200 that's going to pump out, 12 to 1400 pre-rolls an hour, infuse them, and it's just going to kind of work like a microwave to some extent with some of our new upgrades that are coming out this year. But I think the important thing for me in that conversation is to really put a customer in a position to not overbuy, which is not something people expect me to say when I talk to them about that. But I mean, we have to find the right solution for you. You know, our PR200 is a phenomenal option for a lot of customers doing a ton of pre-rolls, but it may be too robust for an entrepreneur just starting out or a mom and pop store that's kind of moving from other knocking type systems to automation. So I think our job, no matter who you work for on the automation side, is deviating from this mindset that thinking about the money side, the transactional side. I approach it as how can we partner with you, support your success, support your needs, because we have different options. I don't want to put you in the biggest, best solution if it's not the solution that fits your path and journey. So I think for what I would say for those on the sales side, because I have done this a while, is that you really have to kind of take a step back. I think in the cannabis space, we deviate from common sense business practice because it's cannabis. There's cash just flowing around, right? We all think. I think we've got to do a better job of really finding solutions for customers and meeting them where they are. And so I kind of have always had this approach of partnerships over transactions and solving problems for today, but also for tomorrow too. The last thing I ever want to get is a customer who I don't do my job. I don't put them and help them get into the right equipment. And then they're coming back in 6 months and now they need to spend more money. We never want to do that because that's us failing the customer and not putting them in the right solution from day one, which should be our goal, right? Across the board.
Can we create the perfect pre-roll puff through automation?
We can, and we have. So we have this. You will be the kind of the first. We haven't even marketed this yet, actually. So this is going to be kind of cool. We are releasing at MJ Biz later this year a version 6 of our PR200. We have all been chasing in this industry from an automation standpoint, in particular pre-roll automation, a microwave, right? Like the microwave mentality of press start, let it go. 5 years ago, if you'd said we'd get there, I'd said, yeah, no chance, right? Like this product is too volatile. It's different every hour, much less day, much less strain, much less state, much less brand, right? Like there's too many variables. So, and at the end of the day, we're packing a sticky product in a piece of paper. So like, let's step back and think about what we're actually trying to achieve. It's not a cigarette. We can't move that fast. We have systems that can do it for a period of time, and then they just tank out because all their components are stuck together and then they're cleaning for 6 hours. So, I had this interesting perspective of coming from the beginning, kind of where automation was new to the industry and kind of this new thing. And now we have this V6 at PreRoll-Er PR200. And, we're doing a lot of things very differently, but I won't give away all the secrets. But one of the really intriguing differences that we've been able to achieve is the issue with pre-rolls. It's all about density and compaction and even airflow, right? Like those things all go hand in hand. If you're not, no matter how you're producing a pre-roll, if you are not packing this pre-roll consistently, and that's variable because it's not going to be the same density for every strain, blend, etc. under the sun. We have to remember that there is no one size fits all solution to cannabis and pre-rolls in particular. But until now, we haven't had a solution to actually deal with that. We all knew it. We just didn't have a solution to deal with it. So our V6 is tip of the spear technology. It's the same platform as the PR200 has always been, but we have some nuanced changes. And one of the big changes that is going to blow the industry by storm that has to do with quality is we're packing based on density, and the machine is learning. So the machine is learning over every single pre-roll that you're producing and basing its compaction on the density of the product in the pre-roll. There is no other system and no other technology that exists like this that is actually learning and essentially reading the material that's in that pre-roll and going in. It's incredible that the engineers on our team have come up with it. And I do think That being one of a few other kind of secrets that'll be released on the V6. Um, I'm very pleased and happy to be in a company that's constantly innovating. I think we as an industry, kind of put a bunch of equipment out there, right? And said, well, this is good enough. It solves a problem. It's automatic as opposed to manual, but we didn't really continue to evolve. And I am very pleased that PreRoll-Er as a company has a commitment to innovation in this industry. I mean, these are nuanced problems on our new PR200, but it's eliminating some of the operator input. And believe it or not, that's what we kind of need to do because the operator is always going to be the variable that none of us can account for, right? Beyond the product itself. So yeah, I'm pumped, and we've got some cool stuff coming. MJ Biz, I mean, an all-in-one system that can produce any pre-roll you've ever seen, including a cigarette style flat top cut in one system. Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing that can touch it. So I'm pumped. It's really an exciting time to be in automation.
Well, and I'll try and pry some of those other details out of you
Yeah.
throughout this. But so definitely, that's one thing that stood out. It seemed like you're trying to take operator or human error out of the equation. And is this machine learning going to be kind of marketed as an AI quality control?
I'll leave that up to the marketing team, but to some extent, yes. I don't know how much we'll hang our hat on AI, right? I guess it would be pretty smart if we did a little bit with how big AI is in any form now. But I think that producing a system that does collect data, read the data, interpret the data, and then put that total loop back into the system for the next pre-roll, and it's doing it that fast, I think that's pretty powerful. The goal is to put product in, cones in, press start. And if you want to do an infused blend where you're infusing via needle down the middle, you can do that. Tell the machine I want 70% flour, 30% resin infusion. It's going to do it, right? Those aspects that an operator used to have to produce input, that can be a little tricky, right? If we're infusing or if we have a different grind size, moisture content on this strain versus the next batch I'm running, they had to be aware enough to know that the compaction, we needed to compact more, right? So I think eliminating some of those, just they weren't impossible challenges. They weren't even really hard challenges, but sometimes managing equipment isn't the most fun job, right? Like, believe it or not, and producing pre-rolls isn't always the best. So we want to produce equipment that evolves with the industry's needs and demands, but also provides access for our customers to any size, any shape, anything that this industry can throw at you. We want you to be able to produce it without having to spend even more money, right? Like, that's the goal.
How quickly is the machine, the new V6, able to make those changes? I mean, just because the PR200, does the 200 mean it can do 200 a minute?
No, so it'll actually do the PR200 system will do somewhere in the range of 12 to 1400. So it kind of depends on density of product, size. Are you infusing it or not infusing it? So it's, everybody in this industry knows that some of our throughput, right? The clocking speed I hear constantly, it's like that's what the machine will do. But we have to take the approach of, well, what are we asking the machine to do? Because it's just going to do what you want it to do, right? So, yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a big conservative guy. Like, I'm not one to send a customer down an ROI calculation based on a bad number. Go conservative with calculations on it. But yeah, it'll it'll produce rather around 12 to 1400, dependent upon what you're running through it.
And how long? 12 to 1400?
Yeah, 12 to 1400 in an hour.
In an hour, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So when it has that throughput, will it know, like, okay, it'll learn from this pre-roll and the next pre-roll
Immediately.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the next pre-roll, so if it's, it's reading the density. So we're doing something very different from a compaction standpoint. We are basing pre-roll compaction, so how many times we pack, on the density. So the machine knows this is the density that I'm seeking to achieve. When I achieve it, boom, it goes off to the next one. So theoretically, once you hit it, you shouldn't really have to, I mean, the machine shouldn't be changing too much over the span of an hour, but over the span of an 8 hour run, or even if we have customers running almost 24 hours a day constantly on these machines, it's certainly going to be changing its density, which essentially all we're doing is we're compacting it more, right? That's all it's really doing. And the pressure that it's compacting, it might not necessarily be how many times we're compacting. It might be the pressure that we're putting on it each time. So yeah, it's going to constantly have this feedback loop that every single pre-roll, it's ensuring that every single pre-roll is quality, consistent. We have to produce for our customers this ability to achieve, like a Starbucks model where if I am in one state in California smoking this pre-roll for Jeter or whatever brand, and then I go to Florida and I'm smoking it, we have to be able to achieve that. And that's what this system provides is access to consistency.
Is it measuring density based on compaction, or is there a draw as well?
So it's measuring it based on compaction. So
Okay.
you're right. It's interesting. So the draw we still have quality control agents, we call them, right? But yeah, so we're not basing it on the draw, but we're essentially basing it on compaction. And the one input a customer or a sorry, the one input that a an operator can still have, and think about it like as a director of ops, right? If they're setting their machine up, setting a new SKU, setting whatever, they can do a draw. And I mean, I think that's a great manual process that never needs to leave this industry. Go smoke the pre-roll, like, have the consumer experience. I'm not advocating for a bunch of, uh stoned operators, but I do think when you're launching a new brand, a new SKU, a new strain, whatever it is, you have to try it, because that is the one manual input that I don't know if we can ever overcome that from automation standpoint. We have draw testers and that's fine, but yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for that step, to be fair, on the front end. Don't get too carried away every, 30 minutes you're checking pre-rolls, right? But I like that. I think that input, so you can manually input that into the machine. This is too dense, this is not, but the machine's going to learn. So you kind of have two choices, but I think some combination of automation and then that operator on this particular point from a drawing perspective, unless you're running it through draw testing. Yeah, heck yeah. I think that's a step we should always have, to be fair.
How can automation open up pre-roll production for small and mid-sized manufacturers?
What it's going to do is it's going to solve the problem of overhead and labor. Labor is expensive, labor is inconsistent, and again, as I said before, producing pre-rolls by hand or by any type of knocking type small system, it is not fun. No one likes to do it. Trust me, ask them. They don't. And it's access to labor is very hard to come by for these manual jobs. And then we have a lot of brands too that have a team of 10 people that do a phenomenal job, but they still can't match automation because your hands get tired, whether you're twisting or you're manually compact. Like, it's just, you cannot hit consistency over an 8 hour shift. You just can't. We can't as humans. I think that if we take the approach of automating first and doing it intelligently, maybe not getting that, the big bad boy, the PR200. I think that you have to have this risk reward decision making mindset of, okay, if I get in the right system that's producing pre-rolls for me, I have less overhead because our systems are all one operator systems. One operator, typically, our beginning system on the PRSTR, you're going to do about 840 pre-rolls an hour. That's a lot of pre-rolls for one person. That's pretty good from a starting standpoint. You can get in the door, you can do infusion on that, $3,800 a month, right? So when I think we approach that decision as new brands or new smaller mid-sized businesses, I think what you're looking at is the margin. I think you have to look at the margin and the cost of goods too, but the margin on that finished pre-roll, because with labor, you're eroding your margin. And I think that not only from a costing standpoint, from an investment standpoint, like that's its own whole decision criteria. I do fundamentally believe, as that entrepreneur background, that brands have the opportunity for a first impression once. This is an industry with choices. The consumer has the ability to go to, a dispensary and shop with their eyes potentially, or ask a bud tender, oh, what should I get? Right. I even still do that. And so I think that we have to remember that if we're not producing the best quality pre-roll, edible, whatever it is, at the onset of launching a new business brand, SKU, whatever it might be, you have a risk there that potentially could blow up in your face if you're not producing consistency. Because as a consumer, I want to know that every single pre-roll I get is going to be the same experience. I'm not going to have a hot spot in an infused joint where it's just, a bubble of distillate sitting in there, or I'm not having an overly packed pre-roll that there's almost zero airflow, so it's just burning the tar essentially. And those are experiences that I think that we, not only as manufacturers, but as an industry that is producing pre-rolls, I think we just have to do a better job. And automation is that solution. I don't think it'll ever change. As great as humans and passionate as some of the people I go and visit and see who are packing pre-rolls, they're just not going to be able to match what automation can achieve over an 8-hour shift.
Will the technology that's coming out in V6 of the 200, will that trickle down to the other models in the line card?
It will in some cases, but we have a couple different. So we do have a centrifuge system for some of our entry level systems. What we've done at PreRoll-Er, I think, has been actually brilliant, and it's been incredibly necessary because of our investment in innovation. We have two engineering teams, one on the packaging side, one on the pre-roll specific side. And I mean, if you've ever worked with engineers, they will create phenomenal things. But what I think we realized about a year or so ago is we may have too many solutions on the pre-roll automation side, so we've consolidated. That consolidation does a couple things that's beneficial to a customer. It provides less choices, because in reality, I think sometimes too many choices is not a good thing. So I think consolidating the options, kind of tying it to, what does the customer need, is a positive from a decision-making standpoint. It's very hard, and it was very hard to distinguish between a PR 100, 150, 200, 400. That's just chaos, because they all kind of do about the same thing, same throughput. But now we have customers in a position to where they can base a decision on, if they want to look at, well, how much do I have to spend, or how much can I even afford? How much do I need to afford? That's there. And I think that's a really good element that I talk to people a lot about. Throughput is another kind of key criteria that most people, if you're doing 100,000 plus pre-rolls a month, our starter system probably isn't the right solution for you. So again, those are some really key areas, but the big advantage for us in consolidating is that we can speed up manufacturing. Manufacturing now becomes a little bit more affordable. So we actually, about a year ago, were able to reduce prices for customers. Some listening to this and that comment might, laugh at that, but it did happen. And I think we're constantly trying to find efficiency in manufacturing and operations, because if it costs us less, it's going to cost the customer less. And that's a positive. That is something that we're very committed to.
When it comes to operators that aren't in pre-roll production yet, are there still the common misconceptions about what pre-roll production entails, or are we overcoming those as an industry where operators are more inclined to kind of get into the category?
Rephrase that for me. Let me make sure I answer it the right way you want it, or not you want it, but the right way you're asking it.
No, so are any operators still hesitating to get into pre-roll production? Are there any common misconceptions when it comes to making pre-rolls?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I thought that's kind of the past. So I would say, are they hesitating? Probably just more from when's the right time, to be fair, because the pre-roll segment is the fastest growing, most consistent segment in every single industry, every single state, whether they're, within the first two years of being a legal state, 2+, 4+, kind of there's that timeline. But we see the same trends, the same cycles. So I think I think pre-roll manufacturers and operators just have to determine when the right time to make the jump is for them. It might not be day one. It just might not be capital demand, whatever it may be. I don't know the specific criteria, but those are kind of the decisions they have to make if they're launching a new business. Um, I do think that we have done a good job on the automation side of the industry to begin. Well, we've been doing it a while, but I think we're doing it better now. Educating, our customers, obviously the ones producing pre-rolls, at just the nuanced differences between the quality you can achieve. I think that sometimes we get so bogged down thinking about quantity, 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 and I hear that constantly. And I do feel that up until maybe, a year ago, with automation in general from a pre-roll perspective, we have had to we've forced customers to almost choose quality over quantity or quantity over quality, and we're past that now. And I think that's incredible because that shows growth and that shows the ability to adapt, because you should not have to choose throughput over the quality of a pre-roll. You should not have to choose that. I'm a firm believer in pre-roll kind of stands behind that with some of the innovations we've made on V6 in particular. But with that being said, I do think it's not necessarily a hesitation. It depends on who you're asking, though. If I like to say repurposing labor, not replacing labor. I think that's a distinction that needs to be made, because there are other jobs that those packing pre-rolls could probably do, as opposed to just cutting them loose. So I mean, again, that's based on the operation to decide. But I do think that we have to remember that automation is a solution to challenges. It should be viewed as that, whether it's because you can't produce enough pre-rolls. Maybe that's why you decide to make the jump, or maybe that's when the time is the right time, or if you're not getting the consistency, or maybe your overhead is just now too much of a burden to where you need to reduce that so you can actually make profit on a pre-roll. That's what should be happening. So yeah, I don't know that I see as much pushback to automation. We're starting, I think, or at least I feel like we're starting to regain the trust. Trust was lost, 5, 10 years ago. And for good reason. We didn't do a good job with automation in this industry in the beginning because it was all very new to all of us. I think we've grown as an industry, the automation side of this industry, and we're regaining trust. We're doing business the right way. That to me is why I'm involved. And if we're, if I think if we all take a step back professionally, you got to go to sleep at night, right? If I'm not supporting customers, I will never be the reason they go out of business. I should be the reason they succeed even more. And that's kind of how I feel my role is.
Was there a specific breaking point 5 years ago when that trust was lost?
I think it was just too much too fast. I think it was too much automation too fast. I don't think we fully understood just across the board, as automation companies. I don't think we fully understood, the challenge of putting cannabis in a pre-roll, right? And I think when automation came onto the scene, right, we were speeding up a process. And it was kind of that knocking process in the beginning for most companies that existed. We were just speeding it up. And I don't think we necessarily, that was a quantity move. I feel that, 5, 10 years ago in the industry, and it was quantity. So you would get kind of the loose necks, you would get the accordion of the paper. I think we jumped so quick to solve a problem. And I think that was all positive and it was needed at the time. But I also, I've heard those horror stories, and thank goodness they're few and far between now, and I'm very happy about that part. But when I first started, I think every other phone call was a story from a potential customer about how they spent, $500,000 on a piece of equipment that's never run since day one, and it's sitting in the corner collecting dust. And from day one in this industry, coming in fresh, I'm like, I don't understand that mentality, right? And so I have seen the trust grow and be regained, but what I know we do and what I know I do in particular, and my team does on a daily basis, is we're not complacent with just getting someone's money. Like that is not the right approach to managing customers and relationships. I fundamentally believe, and pre-roller believes, that I think our work starts when the machine lands. Like, the sales process is the sales process. I think the rubber meets the road when you have our equipment. That's when our job starts, is my view, and it's kind of our team's view. So, finding ways to make solving problems for customers, whether it's through, tutorial videos, or almost this concept that we have on our system, on the HMI, of kind of like I have this problem, here's the solution, or here's a few things to test. We have customer portals. We had to do something as an industry that we were never doing before. And those that chose to step up and provide better relationships with customers and automation, I think have found success. And yeah, and others probably have struggled and maybe even gone out of business on the automation side. But I think, again, that shouldn't be specific to cannabis. That should be specific to doing business the right way and customer service and support. I think that's kind of critical. So,
Speaking of some of those challenges, what are some of the post-harvest processing best practices that operators can do to improve their automation efforts?
yeah, so I mean, a lot of the times from the pre-roll side in particular, and you know, I'm not an expert when it comes to what some of our industry experts do, pulling crops down and stuff. And I think that's the secret sauce behind it too. But I know a lot of the time, timing your grinding of flour and of biomass is critical, because managing the grind size and timing of that also plays with moisture content, which obviously is the domino effect of producing a good pre-roll. So with all of that being said, I think that how a customer, if we take the grinding step forward right into the realm of pre-roll production, packaging, etc., I think timing of grinding is critical. I think equipment of grinding, and we don't do grinding, so I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of like, pitch this or buy this. But I think here's the one thing I can tell, and I do get this question all the time. From a grinding standpoint, you have to remember, there are phenomenal systems that claim they'll grind hundreds of pounds in an hour and all this crazy stuff. You have to just remember, from a grinding process standpoint, if you have a high RPM machine, so it's turning very quickly, grinding very quickly, in theory, you may think, oh, great, that's fantastic. What we have to remember is that higher RPMs generate heat through friction. So I would suggest, and there's a lot of solutions that exist out there. I would suggest thinking about milling style machines, lower RPM, lower churn rate on the grind, so that we're not creating friction and heat buildup. We're not destroying the trichomes. I hate to see customers who are passionate and blood, sweat, and tears into growing their product, and then with one fell swoop, they destroy the product through the grinding process. So like that to me is critical, because you have to remember what goes in a piece of automation, what goes in the PR200 or the PRSTR. The input we don't control, and your output will produce a killer joint, but if your input material was subpar, inferior, or maybe just, not with a quality focus, you just have to remember that that's going to trickle down to the consumer experience. So again, to each their own 100%, but from a grinding perspective, for me, I've just seen that as such a critical step of the process that just can't be overlooked, to be fair.
When you talk about your job starts when the machine lands,
Mm-hmm.
what do you guys do when it comes to training and maintenance?
Yeah, so we're super hands-on. So actually Training, onboarding starts the minute a customer commits to purchasing a piece of equipment. So that's going to look different depending on the type of equipment, but there are similarities. We're going to have onboarding calls. We're going to be discussing what type of pre-rolls are you looking to produce, making sure that you have some of these conversations up front about everything from grinders, right? Milling solutions, input, how you manage input material to get the best product. Some customers, believe it or not, we're able to educate them on how they can produce the best pre-roll. And that I think is a step we do really well is reading the room and sensing, if you, for example, you never have done pre-rolls before, or you wanted to get into producing an infused pre-roll, we can help educate, because though we don't do it hands-on as a brand, this is what we do every single day. And we try to be, at the front of the conversation from educating this industry and helping people succeed. Some customers obviously come very prepared, coming from other automation. Now maybe they're upgrading for higher throughput and capacity. So again, that conversation starts really early on. But when a machine lands, we'll actually do on-site install and training. That varies dependent upon customers' selection of that. But for us, I mean, we can do anywhere from a day up to 5 days on site, depending upon if you're trying to do infused pre-rolls with our infuser, which is then kind of a syringe needle infusion. We want to be there a couple days. And it's not because the system is complex. The system is very simple. It's more because when you're working with material that the viscosity matters. We tend to want to be hands-on and really have customers succeed with that particular component. But yeah, I mean, I think our commitment is whatever you need. I mean, it does not matter to us as pre-roller. If you want to try to do a remote setup on some of our starter equipment, it's doable. I think our job is to be there when you need us, to make sure that the foundation of skills is there. And even our lease program comes with annual visits. Think about the turnover we've kind of hit on in some ways here. Turnover is huge. You may lose an operator and then you're thinking, wait a second, who's going to train this new operator? We don't even have anyone anymore. We can provide resources and support. And I think customer service with automation is the only way we win trust back. And I think we do a really good job with that.
Since it seems every industry struggles with labor, when it comes to repurposing employees, is cannabis stronger when it comes to helping prevent turnover? Because I don't know if it's a generalization. Well, it is a generalization, but it seems to me that some employees are in cannabis because they want to be in the cannabis industry. So are they easier to repurpose?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you have passion in this industry I mean, look, some employees, others not, right? Like it's some it's just a job. And I get that and I respect that. But I do think we have a level of passion in this industry that you throw someone and say, hey, we just brought in automation. We're going to automate our pre-roll production. I also know, and I've seen this live in action, brands, businesses, leaders who communicate the why we're doing this, win the hearts and the minds of your employees. You're going to keep them. And then that passion is there, even if you're moving them from something they've done for 2 years, maybe, right? Like that pre-rolls is their game. They smoke them, they pack them at work. It's their thing. I think as long as we're communicating internally now, I think, you keep that passion pretty fresh. And what I've also seen work really well is that, and again, I think a lot of customers are not anticipating this with their employees. Changing up what they're doing is not a bad thing, right? I mean, packing pre-roll, however it's done manually, it is not fun. Ask anyone, trust me. I've been in those rooms and, and they're very happy spirited people, but it's just not the most fun gig. So yeah, I think that the employee is the determining factor of their ability to move back and forth. And I think that's the same if you're a plumber or, in any industry, right? So, but I would say, yes, we have passion in this industry that is for me, it's incredible to see people who care about the flower, the product, the industry, and they may feel there may be a cog in a wheel, but I think that in reality, their step of whatever the process is critical to the consumer experience, because there's a lot of hands on the manual side of producing products. If one set of hands doesn't do their job, that could be a poorly packed pre-roll. That could be a loosely, closed pre-roll, or even the label on a tube can be slightly off, right? Like, I think that we care in general a lot about, the brands we work with. If I'm, working at a California brand, or I think that you do have a lot of people that just they take pride in their job. And I don't know that I've seen anything quite like it, to be fair, that this industry has produced in pretty significant numbers.
About 6 to 12 months ago, it seemed like infused pre-rolls were going to be the next best thing. Has the infused pre-roll market met your expectations?
Yeah, I think it's exceeded it. I mean, when I start having conversations about how I can double and triple infuse pre-rolls, and I'm like, what in the world is that, right? And I'm trying to get caught up myself. Man, I'm telling you what, the infused pre-roll is it's a slippery slope of a conversation. But what I will say is, did it I think it exceeded expectations in some states of how quickly we got to this double, triple infused, and the technology caught up and brands caught up. But I don't know that it broke the cycle. The cycle typically in a state as it goes recreational is, it's almost like I compare this to craft beer, and maybe those that drink a good IPA kind of get where I'm coming from. You have these mass producers. Let's get as many pre-rolls out there as we can. We don't really care about quality because the consumer doesn't really care about quality. They just want to get high, right? And they don't understand. So let's get a bunch of product out there. And we do that as an industry in a new emerging state. And that's fine. It solves the problem of the moment, which is there's a huge demand. Let's supply and flood the market. And it works. It's worked in some, look at Oklahoma, for example. We have different states have kind of like slow rolled it or just expedited the process, and there's been different outcomes. But cyclically, we have this increase towards THC heavy products. Most consumers, many consumers, I think that from the conversations I have with, just bud tenders at dispensaries or brands, product segment kind of managers on the pre-roll side, most consumers are buying off of THC percent because they're tying that thought process to, well, if I got a 120 proof bottle of whiskey or whatever, that's going to get me really, drunk real quick, right? But we know that's not exactly how THC works. So I think that we're finding now with this cycle constantly this uptick to THC heavy infused pre-rolls. And in all fairness, higher profit margin for the customers that I work with. And I think that's great, right? But I do know, with the same conversations I have with those that are chasing these, 50% THC blends of double, triple infused craziness, and people are still buying them. I do know that there's now kind of this refocus towards craft, towards quality, and it's not throwing a dig at anybody doing an infused pre-roll. Obviously, it's just the difference of people like to drink Bud Light, people like to drink a good IPA, and maybe every once in a while I like IPAs. Maybe I have a Bud Light. Like, I think it's shopping at Walmart versus Target. I think that selection, choice, and variety is what we're now seeing in the more emerging established markets, to where people are going to maybe traveling to Denver, for example, from the East Coast, right? And they're looking to have something specific to the Colorado or Denver market. I think we kind of see that in the more established markets, but man, no, THC pre-rolls, or sorry, highly THC, highly infused pre-rolls, it's not a surprise. It's always going to be kind of that top pinnacle of high profit margin on pre-rolls. Consumers love it. But yeah, I mean, I think we're doing a good job also with that same statement, producing variety too. So I mean, we don't assume everyone now wants just this 50% infused pre-roll, right? So I think we're doing better for sure. But man, I joke all the time. I don't know who's smoking these things because it's not me. But there are a lot of people who are. So
Right. I'm afraid to touch some of them.
me too. And I'm like, holy cow, and they're producing, hundreds of thousands a month and selling them just like you would imagine. So
You mentioned earlier about how, engineers are always working on the next best thing. So what are some of your expectations when it comes to future automation for pre-rolls? What doesn't exist today that, we might see in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that this is a distinction between this is something I've seen, right? So engineers working in a, this visual of like working in this mad scientist lab, that's all great, but we have to remember that if we're producing something that there's no demand for, you may have the best product on the face of the earth. If no one knows about it, no one's buying it. Or if if you yourself in a vacuum produce the next best thing for pre-rolls, who's to say the industry even wants that, right? So like I think that there needs to be, and we've struck this balance of constantly on our internally having the feedback loop, like we talked about on our machine, where the sales and marketing team, those that are kind of boots on the ground, talking to customers, hearing about challenges, solving problems, we have to funnel that information back to our engineering department. So this is not just engineers sitting in the science, lab creating something they think in their closed environment will be the next best thing. We at PreRoll-Er have this relationship between our engineering department, R&D, the sales and marketing, and our customers. I think that's critical. If you're not hearing from the customers who are running these machines, and we run them ourselves, hundreds of thousands of pre-rolls every single week at our facilities, just testing and R&Ding. But again, that's in our facility in one particular environment and one use case. We have to go out and collect data from customers and to try to improve on challenges they're facing. I think that's a distinction that has to be within innovation and engineering in this industry. Being disconnected from your customers is the worst possible case. And I've seen it done. I've seen some crazy stuff be produced by engineers that no one will ever buy and no one ever needed, but they're cool. So I think we have done that really well at PreRoll-Er, is produce an environment where we can listen, provide feedback, and then we provide solutions. The V6 is a perfect example of that. I know I'm dangling a carrot and it's, probably irritating people, but by the time this comes out, I suspect there will be knowledge. But like, for example, I think your question in our stance is the V6 is the solution. It probably will be the best option that exists, I would anticipate, for the next 12 plus months, because we have solved a lot of the problems that everybody's really sick of. And even density, but removing the manual component, providing a system that you don't have to have a ton of tooling changes to do a variety of SKUs. That's a pain for customers because A, there's a cost, and B, you always need things faster than any of us can produce it anyways as a customer, right? So like, I think we try to remove some of those barriers. The compaction, even density, is a huge pre-roll issue. We have solved it very differently. Another big one that we've solved to where I don't know that it can go much farther, be much better, is we actually infuse differently than any other system. Most systems, and there may be one hanging out there that someone listening might disagree with me, but most systems use compressed air to infuse the needle. We don't. We use servos. So we're actually dosing it appropriately. And if you think about a cone in particular, there's less volume at the bottom towards the crutch than the top. You shouldn't dose the amount the same. You'll have a huge hot spot right at the bottom. You'll not have enough infusion at the top. So like, we've just provided some common sense engineering solutions and innovation to just problems that everybody you talk to are probably, having and have been having. So V6 is all about removing the manual inputs and having it be a more automated, self-sustainable system to where truly you put flower cones, you press start, and you can theoretically walk away and then come back and there's, 1,000 pre-rolls sitting there. So that's kind of where we're at. And I think, I don't know what it'll be in 12 months though, right? Like, we say this all the time. So yeah, I think we're there now. So I think we've solved that we've taken a massive leap forward. That I do. But yeah, there's always something crazy. So
No, I'm really excited to check out the V6 at MJ Biz this year. You're going to have it on the floor, right?
yep, we will. Yeah, we're gonna have a pretty killer setup, and I'm pretty pumped about it. We actually will be releasing a couple other, we're talking PR 200. That's on the, the higher side of production demand and need. Incredible piece of equipment. And now user friendly. I think that's maybe beyond the technological advances. It's that user experience that we've also improved, because years ago you needed an engineer to run automation, to some extent, and now, and we none of us, we knew that was unacceptable as an industry and as a segment of this industry, but we just weren't quite there from an automation technology standpoint. So now that's a huge advancement. One of the things that we're actually releasing as well is a smaller, more entry level system, more affordable system, a little bit lower throughput. It's going to come in around about 500 units per hour. Tabletop system, plugs into a wall outlet. I joke all the time at these events that theoretically it could, you could take it and put it on your kitchen table at home if you, wanted to produce a bunch of pre-rolls. But I think this step between manual knocking type systems to automation, expense, high throughput, this is a natural kind of intermediary. It gets customers of that particular, need into automation, higher throughput than manual, a better pre-roll than manual, which is great. And not a high cost of investment too. So we'll be releasing that. That's a big one that's coming out, that no one knows about yet. So that's an exciting one too. I think automation companies have to remember there's different customer types. Some that the PR 200 fits perfectly, and others that it doesn't. And for us to only produce higher end systems that have higher throughputs, do phenomenal things, that's great. It does solve a lot of, customer problems and provides access to growth. There's also a massive amount of brands that need something a little bit smaller, and they that doesn't the step traditionally never existed between, smaller manual type systems to full automation. So I think we're providing that as well and focusing on every type of customer that exists.
No, I'm excited to see that one as well, just because it does fit a niche. And I think there are a lot more operators out there looking for that type of solution.
Yeah, I agree. That's why, that's why we produced it. We've been working on this for about 4 months now. It's done on our end. We're just going to kind of, make a big splash in MJ Biz, which is good fun for the industry to come together as a whole. That'll be exceptional. And the other thing I'm super pumped on, and what this has purely come out of working with customers of all sizes, is from a packaging standpoint, tubes will always be a thing, right? But you have to think about, if I'm a brand starting out, or even an existing brand, the label on a tube is a nightmare. Surface area, like flat, sure, from a design standpoint, cool branding opportunities, but really you don't have a lot of branding. Shipping them, they're not compactable. They are what they are, right? So you're shipping a bunch of air essentially from other places traditionally, and it's costly, it's bulky, it sits in landfills. And so I think one of the really cool things that we're doing, and we're doing a lot of events to kind of educate, not even our customers, just the industry in general, about just packaging options. We're seeing a trend and a shift away from these doob tubes, whether it's a screw cap or a flip top, to like a Mylar type bag, a bag that you typically kind of find flour in, for example. But we're seeing a shift. If you think about that from a cost standpoint, logistical standpoint, and just a common sense standpoint, a bag is flat. So 1,000 tubes is a huge box. 1,000 pieces of packaging, that's a whole different story. You have an opportunity to brand on them now because it's a flat bag. We're doing even some organic recyclable type. I mean, it's just, to me, I'm seeing this trend and shift away from tubes, not to kill that vibe, but because it'll always be a thing. I think it's really, really pretty incredible and enticing, if I were a brand listening to this, to really think about that opportunity, because if I'm a brand competing on a shelf in a dispensary, the visible surface area that I can have with a tube versus a flat bag hanging, right? It's pretty incredible. So we're seeing a huge trend towards that. And I mean, of course, we have solutions for that. Yeah, I think that's another one I'm pretty jazzed up about lately that we're seeing an industry get a little bit smarter. It's pretty exciting to be a part of that.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of those Mylar bags. That's a really cool concept, though, because you're right. A lot easier to ship. And I mean, when you're talking about those doob tubes, you're really reliant on kind of the packaging, like everything but the tube to
Yeah,
sell it
yeah.
from a market.
No, you're right. And we're doing these lunch and learn events now, and it's just educational, right? I mean, it's good for pre-roller, but it's also better for the industry. Um, you have to remember that packaging in this industry is totally different than packaging on anything you'd find on a Walmart or Target shelf, right? The lifespan of packaging in the cannabis space, take it a pre-roll, whatever you want, right? A pre-roll in particular, though, the lifespan of that package in a customer's life could be seconds. I mean, it's as quick as I walk out of the store, I pull my pre-roll out, I light it, I toss the package away because I'm smoking the whole thing. We have to take that approach of, okay, if a dupe tube has all these potential cons, and there are some pros to it, but I mean, nonetheless, still, some cons, and that was the standard. Um, Typically, they're more expensive than these type of little packs and bags. And then again, your surface area, your design branding opportunity, it's like we as consumers, you don't see packaging until you go into the dispensary. I mean, we're not seeing it on TV. So there's no real need for some of our customers, and again, this is from them. This isn't my opinion or our opinion, but there's real no need to invest this incredible amount of time, energy, and money into this beautiful package that's ergonomically, because it doesn't serve a purpose on a shelf like a bottle of lotion or toothpaste does, makeup or perfume, right? We have to just kind of think. I think that is something with the transition and shift a little bit away from tubes, towards potentially bags is a smart move for a lot of brands, and there's a lot of huge brands that already do this. There's a reason that Cookies is doing this, right? And it's cost effective. It's massive from a branding standpoint. And the cool thing that we actually have is we have a system that a lot of these types of bags you fill from the bottom and then you seal them. We actually have a system that you can put your bags in and load your pre-rolls, and we'll dump pre-rolls and seal, and boom, done. It's a pretty cool time. Maybe that's back to like what's next. I think maybe the packaging side for us is where we're making huge gains now that we've solved a lot of challenges with pre-roll production.
No, I've been excited by some of the advancements in packaging, particularly when it comes to more sustainable options.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to see is maybe some operators practice what they preach a little bit more when it comes to
Yeah.
sustainability.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like the quintessential, talk is cheap type mentality, right? To be fair. And but I also think that's incumbent on an industry that needs to provide affordable access to, I mean, like, if given a choice between a biodegradable doob tube and a, kill the earth doob tube, like I will choose, if all things are comparable, I choose the bio. Why would I not? Why would anyone not, right? But they're more expensive. So, I think we have to all commit, and this is probably a deeper rabbit hole than just our industry, right? When we're talking about this philosophy, but I think we have to provide access to consumables like this. But I will say that through these events we've been hosting and having these kind of roundtable discussions with brands that exist, partners, customers or not, doesn't really matter, and gaining that insight. There's a shift going on, and it's a smart shift because margins are tight, competition is high. If you can steal cents in this industry per unit, that's a big deal. So I do see this as kind of maybe the next big thing. And again, it's not new, But we as an automation company have provided a solution to it now to where you can produce your pre-rolls, basically dump them into a bag all through automation, close it, done. Put a label. You want to put another label on it? Sure, go for it, right? But like, I think that's where maybe the next 12 months, some of the advancements may come.
Well, Tyler, I really do appreciate you taking the time. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience knows about yourself or your work at PreRoll-Er?
I think that I don't think there's anything in particular, but what I will say is this, is I think that it is critical for anyone listening to understand that access to automation is possible. We've come a long way, whether it's by providing different levels of automation. Sometimes automation is kind of a scary thing. It's not approachable, seems mind-boggling to consider even bringing on board, right? If you went from a simple manual system, I would say if you get the right people on the phone, and I definitely may be a little biased that, our team is pretty good at this, and there are others too, but get someone on the phone who's willing to listen to where you are and the challenges that you're facing. There is an automated solution for you that exists. It just needs to be the right solution for you. So that would be my bit of advice to customers is don't fear automation. Don't think it's going to replace all your workers. Again, I think that's just a choice and we can repurpose. So automation is a positive. It will do wonders for growth, even if you're established or brand new. So yeah, chat with us at PreRoll-Er. We'd love to be a solution for you guys. Whether you choose us or not, give me a shout. I'd love to share, my experiences and help you solve problems and avoid pitfalls too. That would be a big one.
In your opinion, is the perfect pre-roll made by man or machine?
Depends on the man or the woman. No.
Sorry, person.
Yeah. So yes, I think it's made. I think it. That's a tricky one to end on. So I think we have achieved the perfect pre-roll through automation. I think that man can produce a killer pre-roll once or twice or maybe 3 times a day. What I think the difference is that automation can produce the perfect pre-roll at 1,200 per hour. I think that's the distinction. I don't think one wins necessarily over the other, but I think what we do with automation is we produce perfect pre-rolls at scale. But no, I know a lot of people who can roll a heck of a pre-roll. It's not me, but yeah, I have automation for that. So yeah.
Very good. Well, Tyler, thank you again for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, David.
Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Tyler Vaughan, Channel Sales Manager with PreRoll-Er, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.